Hi everyone, you're watching The Culture Cave. This is episode 10 of the mini-series broadcasting from the Miyakojima Island Chain, and I'm Gabriella White. Now, a few short days ago I was on the beautiful and small island of Tarama, which was an island trip that I was taking as part of an island hopping cruise, and I actually ended up discovering a place of cultural interest. The place of cultural interest was a Dutch shipwreck. Now, shipwrecks and anything connected with the Netherlands and the very prominent connection between Holland and Japan is always something that has greatly interested me ever since embarking in, adventures in Japan. And it just so happened that I was about half a mile from such a place. So a local, as you can see from the previous episodes, actually took me by car because it's extremely hot here at the moment. It's over 30 degrees Celsius, and he insisted that he take me by car. There were no taxis on the island, so we found a couple of spots. The second spot where we stopped the car was actually the actual spot where the shipwreck has been kind of discovered, but only remnants of it have been discovered. So I'm going to, now that I've had a little bit of time to research this spontaneous mini-series, I'm going to talk a little bit about what this actually means and the significance of the site, which curiously is listed on Google Maps under a Spanish name, but it's a Dutch ship. So let's go back to the beginning of when this ship actually was built. It was built in the period of 1854, so that's the actual year that it was built in Germany. It's called the Van Bosse ship, and the period, I guess the lifetime of the ship, let's say, is 1854 to 1857, because in 1857 a great typhoon hit the southwestern part of the archipelago of Okinawa, and this is where this story takes place. So Tarama Island is actually one of the most southwestern islands of the Japanese archipelago, and it's very close to Taiwan. And I'm currently broadcasting this from Miyakojima, by the way, which is about a 2-hour boat ride from Tarama Island. This island is a little bit more inhabited. But at the time, so going back to the mid-1800s, Tarama Island was part of the Ryukyu Kingdom at that time. Of course, in the UK, where I'm from, this was Victorian times. So very interesting, the parallels. In the Netherlands at that time, the Netherlands were under the reign of William III. And even though the nations of Holland and Japan were 10,000 kilometers apart, and obviously still are geographically, the Netherlands and Japan have shared a very long and intense history together, spanning more than 400 years. Now, in Japanese history, the borders of Japan were very, very closed compared to other countries in the world, and they were very closed and basically feared European cultures coming in. It's always been, and still is today to some extent, well, to a large extent actually, a very protected culture. But then it was obviously a lot more extreme. So between 1639 and 1853, the Dutch were Japan's sole European trading partner, and that's why the connection between the Netherlands and Japan is obviously a very special one in European terms. And the trade that took place was mostly of the Dutch East India Company, which left many tangible and intangible traces of maritime heritage in Japan. Now, this shipwreck is a bit of both, because it's interesting because I was at a place recently called the Phantom Isles, but that theme is actually quite relevant to this theme here, because there were pieces of pottery floating around, which I'll get onto a little bit later. So one such trace is the Van Bosse shipwreck, a kind of tangible trace in some respects. And as we search for reasons behind this this shipwreck and what actually happened. It is important to note that the ship was originally built in 1854 in Germany, but it was employed by the Bonke Co trading in Rotterdam. And with a Dutch crew on board, the Van Bosse was on its way from Shanghai to Singapore when it sank during a very big storm in 1857 at Tarama Island, where I was a few short days ago, in Okinawa prefecture. Unfortunately enough, the story did have a happy ending, so all 27 people on board survived. Now, these days, the investigations are still going on. It's a very sought after shipwreck, actually. Remnants of the shipwreck have been retrieved, but the ship itself has not. And the reason for that is the topography of Tarama Island, because Tarama Island has very shallow waters on which I was walking, you know, and it doesn't go very deep, but at some point, about 30 meters into the water, it gets very, very, very deep. So it's a dangerous place to embark in the waters. But the advantage of that is that the shallow waters are very you know, it's easy to pick up little remnants of the shipwreck, and there are so many of them that they haven't all been retrieved, and I actually managed to retrieve some myself. The bigger ones are in a museum. So the Japanese investigations ensued after the shipwreck was discovered through ancestral stories, etc., in the intangible form. But the crew had nowhere to go when the 27 members survived, and they were taken in by the local community, which is where the story gets really, really interesting. So after a few months of kind of landing on shore, you know, shoring up in the Ryukyu Kingdom at that time, the Dutch were allowed to return to the territory of Batavia, which is now present-day Jakarta, Indonesia, interestingly enough. And of course there's a whole history there with the Dutch colonisation in Indonesia. Now there's another character in the story which I discovered with some deeper research. So there was actually this island chain, as many island chains are in the Pacific, are renowned for having beautiful stargazing, and they are also, of course, renowned in history for literally astronomical research. There was a French gentleman at that time, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Father Louis Theodore, who is a French meteorologist who was born in 1816 and passed away in 1900, and he was a missionary of the Société des Missions Étrangères de Paris, which is the French, the Paris Foreign Missions Society, and he was posted in the Far East, and this is where the stories begin to intertwine. He was posted in the Far East from 1853 to 1869, so this is just 1 year. He was posted to Japan 1 year before this ship was built, so this is really, really magic what happened. The discovery of his manuscript of the meteorological observations were undertaken at Naha in Okinawa, which is the capital of Okinawa today, and this opens up the new perspectives on the